Anna Persley. Teddy Bear Workshop is Tuesday. There will be a baby shower here at the building Sunday, the 23rd from 3 to 5. We'll celebrate Melinda Dolan's daughter, Lauren. And Ladd Saliter's Bible Bowl test closes tonight. If you haven't taken the test yet, please do so before the test closes. And we'll open up our Bible study tonight with a word of prayer. Father, we're grateful for this time that we can come together as a family and to learn more about your word and to encourage each other and to lay burdens on each other and to work through the word and help it to be applied to our life, and help us, Father, to be a light to those around us, that they will see your kingdom in us and want to be a part of it. We're thankful for your son Jesus, and it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Good evening. I'll apologize in advance because until I actually speak something, it continually changes, and 5 minutes ago I started thinking about new directions. So that being said, loved the sermon topic and the Connect Groups topic this week. My brain just kind of stuck there, and while I was looking for other things to talk about for Devos, faith just kept coming back. And I will say, we were talking about it in our group. If you haven't realized it, next month is the last of this particular iteration. I texted Tom, and the idea there was to reconstitute the groups into new leaders and places and things like that. So next fall it'll be a little different. So cherish that last meeting of your particular Connect group that you're meeting with in April, because it's going to be something new in the fall, which is also exciting. But considering we had 14 little kids or 12 little kids at times, it's been fun for us as well. But that being said, considering faith, I believe it was in the Bible class, even before the sermon, I didn't speak the thought, but I just kind of had the thought as we were discussing things that my understanding as a child was that If you were here, you were faithful. If you weren't, you weren't. And as an adult and having learned things, I've stepped beyond that because I think that box is far too small to put one group into and one group out of. And I don't discount the fact that the strong desire, the healthy desire to be here is so important to our Christian walk. But unfortunately, attendance isn't some magic thing that is a catch-all to solve how we get to heaven. At one point, I even had this thought, we walk in, we have these words on the front door there as we walk into the auditorium or sanctuary or whatever you like to call it, and we say, these reassuring things to get us in there and these reassuring things to leave, leave to serve. But that door is in no way special, and these pews are in no way special, and they don't transform us in the way the messages do or in the way that our commitment does. But as I continued on these thoughts, I started thinking about the people in my life that I consider pillars of faith. So tonight, the ultimate thing I want you to really think about, which changed 5 minutes ago, is glue. But I'm going to tell you about it by telling you about a wonderful lady who has now passed on, and that would be my grandmother, Geraldine Lacey. Some of you met her. I don't actually see anyone else tonight, but some of you are related to her. If you didn't realize, Michael Darrell was one of her sons, and Keenan specifically is one of my first cousins, all part of that family. She ensured throughout her life that her kids came to church. She had 5. She had 12 grandkids, and I have no idea how many grandkids. But growing up, we were in church as a group, 2 to 3 pews every Sunday morning. From there, we transitioned to meals together right after church at her home. And it was a wonderful time. And from my perspective, it was great because my other family, my father's side, sat on the other side of the church. So I had the choice, which grandparents do I sit with on a given Sunday? And it was wonderful. And I cherish the fact that I grew up that way. However, COVID came around. We lost her in December of 2020. Not to COVID, but just it was her time. And I have seen perhaps the influence that she had led dwindle since she's gone. From that group of 18 to 20 or so people that was completely faithful, a large group that went to church together, now only a few of us are left that now participate. And frankly, most of them are here at Richmond now. And I can't escape the fact that it perhaps is that lost influence that has some of them deciding no longer to come. My first Bible class that I ever taught, I taught to a college group, and I put it together myself on motivations, why people do things. Because in my field, we do a lot of studies, particularly to try and dream up what our users look like and think like and how they make their decisions and whatnot. So I kind of put that to the test with a class where you actually think about why do people make the decisions they make? Why do people believe the way they believe? Marketing folks love it because they are trying to sell a product. But when you're thinking about it for yourself, why do I believe what I believe? Why am I here this Wednesday night in particular? Why have I chosen to be a Christian? All these questions are worth asking yourself. But as I said, I wanted to change this slightly in the last 5 minutes. And considering my grandmother and everything she means to me, because if you don't know this about me, I like to attach hymns to people. She was a beautiful alto singer. Whispering Hope, Paradise Valley, those are my Mamaw songs. I cannot not think about her when you guys lead the song or if I lead it or whatnot. Those are the special songs for just her. So for me, she is glue, but I don't need her here. But at the same time, you're going to be in different walks of life. You may be sitting in this auditorium because of someone that you're sitting next to. You're wanting to please them. You're wanting to make them happy, and that's what you think it does. But on the flip side, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But on the flip side, you might be that glue person that is attempting to pull a family together, to get everyone here, and to put everyone into a right path. And I think both sides have value. But the encouragement tonight is, if you're not a glue person yet, think about how you can become one. Whether you're a father who is trying to motivate your kids to heaven, whether you're a wife who's trying to motivate anyone in your family, whether you're a son or a daughter who needs to be the pillar of faith in your family, anybody in the family can be the glue person that pushes the family towards heaven and won't let it die. I believe Jessica Madden told us in our Connect group once, if she's not feeling it and she's like, I don't really want to go to church, her kids are like, aren't we going though? And that's exactly where you want to be. You want everyone in your family to be that glue person so that whenever possible, it's not a question because they're pulling all of us together. But on the flip side, if you're not the glue person, getting yourself where you're not codependent on another person for your salvation is so critical and so important because when they're gone, you don't want that to be your only connection. With that being said tonight, your challenge, we all, I think, need to be glue people. We all need to be the reason that each of us wants to be here. I know people is my big reason for being here. I stare at a lot of people that I've known for a long time, and I love all the people I see. And I think that's so important that it's not just here because I want to hear a lesson because I like Mike speaking or I want to hear the song leading, but I actually want to interact with the people that are here. So tonight, a simple encouragement, be the glue people as we stand and sing.
Found a friend in Jesus, he's everything to me. He's the fairest of 2,000 to my soul. The lily of the valley, in the Almighty, all I need to cleanse and make me fully whole. In sorrow he's my comfort, in trouble he's my stay. He tells me every care on him to go. He's the lily of the valley, the bright morning star. He's the fairest of 2,000 to my soul. Oh, he all my griefs has taken, and all my sorrows borne. In temptation he's my strong and mighty tower. I have all for him forsaken, and all my idols torn. From my heart and now he keeps me by his power. Though all the world forsake me, and Satan tempt me sore, through Jesus I shall safely reach the goal. He's the lily of the valley, the bright morning star. He's the fairest of 2,000 to my soul. He will never, never leave me, nor yet forsake me here, while I live by faith and through his blessed will. And he will abide about me, I'm nothing now to fear. With his vanity my hungry soul shall fill. Then sweeping up to glory, to see his blessed face, where rivers of delight shall ever roll. He's the lily of the valley, the bright morning star. He's the fairest of 2,000 to my soul.
Hello, hello, hello. Are we there? There we go. I understand that some people got confused because I had failed to change the place where Robert wanted to be in the library, we had it switched. So if you wanted to be in Robert Jeter's class, he's in the library. People thought he wasn't here last week, but he was. So if you want to be in that class, he's talking about the Sermon on the Mount, and we're studying Old Testament survey. Now, someone wanted to know, do we have sheets for tonight? Yes, we do. Why didn't we put them out? Because I handed them out last week, which means if you already have one, you should have brought it. The likelihood is you didn't bring it. But I'd like for people that don't have one at all to get them first. So we're going to hand these out. Mr. Charlie's going to do it over here. That's good. And Mr. Eubanks is going to do it over here. That's good. Yeah, I know you hadn't done anything all day, so you're just needing to move. You didn't have one? Oh, okay. And hang on, Eubanks. I gave you my copy. There we go. All right. So, if you don't have one at all, take one. If you had one and you want another and we have enough, take another. And when you get it, we're on the back. As we do this Old Testament survey with these Bible folders, I was asked, had a Bible study last night, and I was asked, what is the purpose of this? What's going on? And I said, well, this is just a way of creating a study sheet or a study guide that people can have at home so that they can have familiarity with Scripture and remember things better. And so these folders represent the divisions of the Old Testament and of the New Testament to be able to put everything sort of in your minds and hold on to it. What you got, Murray?
In answer to that question,
Yeah.
what came to my mind is
Uh-huh.
we do this kind of a study to help prepare us
Yes.
in the same way that the Lord prepared the world for the entry of the Messiah, the way he used the Jews to prepare the world for the Messiah. In other words, they went through all of that we're reading about
Great
in
idea.
preparation. And as we review that, it prepares us to understand and accept the New Testament better.
I hadn't even considered that. That's a beautiful description of what the purpose of Old Testament study would be. You can hand it right back there to Mr. Nick, and I'll let him. I know he's chomping at the bits to be in charge of a microphone. And I see Mr. Sebastian over there who wants the other one. So that's what yeah, you knew it was coming, didn't you? All right, we just need two, I think. Y'all can handle it. Two young guys, y'all can handle it. So that's good. That's very good. The study of the Old Testament prepared the Jews for the coming of the Messiah. And so someone even might ask, why study the Old Testament? I've heard many times people say, I just spend my time in the New Testament. I don't even spend much time in the Old. Well, I think what Ron has said makes a lot of sense, which is, that's what Paul wrote in Romans 15, verse 4. The things that were written before were written for our learning, that we, through the patience and comfort of the Scriptures, might have hope. And, of course, our hope lies in Jesus Christ. And, therefore, what Ron said, Nick, right down here, please, Mr. Aaron. So what Ron said fits. And so as you go through this, as you're studying the Old Testament, have that mindset that what am I seeing here? How is this leading to my understanding of the Messiah? That's a great idea.
as someone who knew literally nothing about the Bible at all prior to coming to the faith, the first time I read it, the elders told me to, because I didn't know what I was supposed to be reading. The elders told me to start with the Gospels and the chapters that just summarize the salvation, like passages in Romans and Corinthians and everything. But I just read the whole thing, and I started with Matthew, and I mean, like, there's a lot that doesn't make any sense, because I mean, Jesus keeps quoting Isaiah, and I'm like, well, who the heck is that? Yeah. And I think the Old Testament, really what it does is it shows God's character, and really it makes a lot of sense as to like why Jesus is saying what he's saying.
Very good. There are so many things in the New Testament that are drawn from the Old Testament to such a degree that if we don't understand that Old Testament thought or event or situation, it makes it difficult to understand the New. Maybe, well, certainly the coming of the Messiah, but it may be not any more or better represented than in studying the book of Revelation. If you don't know any Old Testament stuff, the Revelation makes no sense whatsoever, because the whole idea of that fantastic language is Old Testament. That's where it began. And so understanding that helps in that book. So, and certainly the Gospels are quoting Isaiah and the prophets all the time, the Psalms. And so, great stuff. I'm glad you all said that. Now, the goal that I have in this class is to have each folder, study each folder for 2 weeks. And so what we're doing, if you notice, is looking at it from the journalistic viewpoint: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Well, I want to think for a few minutes in Genesis chapter 2. Let's start there on geography, the where, putting the geography in our minds as to where things took place. We start in verse number 10. Genesis 2, now a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it parted and became 4 river heads. The name of the first is Pishon. It is the one which skirts the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. Bdellium and the onyx stone are there. The name of the second river is Gihon. It is the one which goes around the whole land of Cush. The name of the third river is Hiddekel. It is the one which goes toward the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is the Euphrates. Here's the problem with that text. The problem is this is pre-flood geography. And post-flood geography could very well have been quite different. In fact, it very likely could be the case that these rivers changed their course where they were to where they are. That's possible, very possible. But there are some indications that we can know. There is, at the end there, Assyria. Now, Assyria is up above the land of Palestine, around Turkey. That's the area of Assyria. And so he mentions that, and that's still, when you come to the children of Israel being taken off into Assyrian captivity, that's where they went. And so that's an area that we know is real. And so it says there that it is going up that way, one of the rivers. That whole land above Palestine, around to Turkey, Iran, Iraq, as we understand, up in that area. So we can sort of figure it out. There have been various studies, various videos made. I have seen one that was people claiming that they have found the Garden of Eden. Well, maybe the area, very possible to find the area. Tree of Life's not there anymore. I doubt the angel's still there with the sword. So how do we know? I don't know it would make sense to me that part of the chaos of the flood was to wipe out and reshape. And so the likelihood is we're going to see this reshaping here in another section. So that's, generally speaking, I think it is safe to say that the breadbasket of all life is right there in that part of the world. That's where it all began. Nick, right to your left there, please.
I have a recommendation that I learned about. There's an app on the iPhones called Bible Maps.
Okay.
And you can literally put in a text and it will highlight geographic areas and then show you on the map
Oh, that's cool.
a best guess as to where that area was.
Where are they? Do they show, did you put any of the ones we
Yeah,
talked?
the one you mentioned is up around Turkey.
Yeah, okay.
Turkey now.
Okay, cool. So if you have an iPhone, Bible Maps. Right. It's just free. Bible Maps. You type in whatever you're looking for, and it'll show you where on the map that it's located. That's pretty cool. So some of y'all will be doing that throughout the whole class. That's good. No problem with that. It does? You're looking for it? Well, Erica showed me another cool thing. I had done something for the preachers, and I had a study of some Greek words on preaching in the book of Acts, and the Greek words are there. And apparently, Google Lens, she took a picture of it through Google Lens, and it translated all those Greek words into what they mean. That's pretty cool. I haven't checked every one of them yet to make sure they were right, but there are a lot of technology stuff that's going to be extremely valuable. So, go to chapter 10 in the book of Genesis. This chapter is, to my mind, very interesting. And I want you to notice some things that happen. Look at verse 5. He mentions all these, and he says, from these, the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, and into their nations. Look at verse 20. The sons of Ham, according to their families, according to their language, and their lands, and their nations. Look at verse 31. Sons of Shem, according to their families, according to their languages, and their lands, according to their nations. Look at the end of verse 32. And from these nations and from these the nations were divided on the earth after the flood. Chapter 10 summarizes, I think, what happened after chapter 11. Because what happened in chapter 11 is the Tower of Babel. Now, when you read about the Tower of Babel in chapter 11, go to verse number 4. Come, let us build ourselves a city, a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. And then the Lord said in verse 6, indeed the people are one, and they all have one language. This is what they begin to do. Now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. And then that's when, verse 7, he confused their languages, verse 8, and spread them or scattered them over the face of the earth. But chapter 10 says that they were divided by their languages, their nations, their families. So I think that I'm supposed to understand that chapter 10 is a reaction to the flood, but also to the Tower of Babel. And so he tells us in chapter 10 where it's going to start, or what's going to happen, and then chapter 11 says, here is why it happened. And so again now, if you look at these divisions, these things that happen geographically, look at verse 11 of chapter 10. And you see there, the beginning of the kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, Calneh, and the land of Shinar. from that land, he went to Assyria and built Nineveh. Okay? There's Nineveh. We know about Nineveh. Look at verse 25. It's an interesting verse. To Eber were born 2 sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided. I still say that's talking about this. There's another thing that I'll mention here. Look at verse 32. It was after the flood. Here, some have surmised that, well, let me back up. Prior to the flood, I think it's obviously true and apparently scientifically true that the land mass to water ratio on the earth was different prior to the flood than after the flood. In other words, there was a lot more water on the earth after the flood than before the flood, because the fountains of the deep were broken up and the rain was poured down from heaven. Now, in a quick thing, I don't know if we mentioned it or not, but I'll do it very quickly. I think we mentioned it, in creation, God created a body of water, if you will, surrounding the earth, making the whole earth one temperature. And that water, that canopy of water, which in Genesis 1 is called the firmament. In that, I believe that's the word. In that canopy, or what that canopy was, being water, part of the flood. God pushed it down and pushed water up from inside the earth. It is my opinion, if you go to the Creation Museum and see their video demonstration of how the flood happened, which is really cool, I believe that when God broke up the fountains of the deep and let water come up from underneath, I believe that's what created the earthquake fault lines. Because it doesn't make sense, does it? That God would create the earth and say it's very good and it had fault lines for earthquakes? Doesn't make any sense. So I think the way he broke it up created fault lines. But then the water that was there is up and the water that was there is down. And so I think likely that at least as waters moved around and finally got situated, that things look radically different before the flood than after the flood. And so these nations that we're talking about, they're scattering after the flood. And I'm not saying there was a static setup. Likely things changed. They're still changing to this day. There's movement. But you have to, when you put this in your head, you got to think, well, wait a minute. How did they get from that part of the country to America, what became America? Because it's always been rather funny, interesting, isn't it? When you read about and you talk about the people that landed here and found America, they didn't discover America. There were people here when they got here. So how did they discover it? I don't know why we would say that, but we just connected with people who are already here. Well, how did they get here? There must have been ways to move, maybe land masses being able to move, maybe from, say, from Alaska over to the European coast, a land mass that might have shifted over the years and cut it off finally. I don't know. But the earth changed. Everything is different now than it was prior to the flood. And so this is, chapter 10 is talking about the division of the earth. There is something that people talk about in science called continental drift. I don't know if I believe in continental drift. Maybe it's true. I just don't know. But if you look at, you've seen it, if you look at a map of the earth, it looks like every country can be shoved together like puzzle pieces because they've been moved apart. Well, while that's true, it is also true that if you have a tray of water or a tray of dirt and you pour water in it and it makes its own path through that, it also looks like those pieces could be shoved together like puzzle pieces, doesn't it? But it didn't. There wasn't continental drift in that movement. It's just the water caused it. Because when it goes over here, it leaves here. So all that kind of stuff, this division of the earth, there's just a lot there that I don't think we understand. But it's fascinating to me that God is talking about how all things happen. And so you got these languages. And apparently, if I understand it right, Ham's descendants went south primarily to Africa, and Shem's descendants, I think, were in the Palestine area up into Turkey, and Japheth went east over into what we know as Asia. That's how it, when they divided their languages, that's how they went. And after that, I don't know anymore. So if you've studied that and you know it, just let us know. Be glad to hear it. All right. I want to move into why. The why of this folder. Two things that I want to ask. Here's number one. What did we learn? What am I supposed to learn about the Tower of Babel and what happened there? What lessons am I supposed to learn from that event? I'm not talking about God said scatter, you didn't scatter, therefore you disobeyed. Okay, I get that. I want something deeper. What do we learn from the Tower of Babel that is good for us to know today? Right there.
I think one thing that came to mind is there have been several parallels since then, like the fall of empires or just the fall of people who try to like build like something for themselves too much, like.
Well, when the city of
I'm trying to think of an example, but
Nineveh was rebuilt, and God said, was it right? Is it Nineveh city? Not to rebuild it again, and his child died when he built it. Anyway, those kinds of things happen. Yes.
Yeah, and like how when you're working to build something like for man or for something that is created by God, it's rather than for God Himself, it's going to get knocked down.
Okay, that's a good lesson. If you're doing something for yourself, it may not last because God's not in it. I think that's exactly what we learned from the Tower of Babel, that these people had decided that they're going to do what they wanted to do, and it was for them. And the purpose was so that we're not going to be scattered all around. We want to stay together. And trying to do that then, God disrupted it because that's not what He wanted.
A different way to say kind of the same thing, that God is ultimately in control. We're not.
There you go. God is ultimately in control. He manages things. You think about the next folder. This folder I have identified as the products of sin. We see what sin causes in these first 11 chapters. The next section, we're going to talk about the providence of God, and we can see it really well in how He's working in a positive way there. But this idea that God is in charge and He does things, we learn that. And I don't think we should believe that God did things, but He doesn't do anything now. He's still doing things.
I think in answer to your question, one response that I would have is that the Tower of Babel was a manifestation of human hubris and pride.
There we go. That's what I was going to get at. I think, and that hasn't, think about that's at the beginning of time practically. And how have things changed? That's what we struggle with. That's what we fight. Our own arrogance, our own pride. We need to be people who are humble. And the Tower of Babel says, you're not. You need to work on it.
It's more the reality that the people were doing everything contrary to God. We see this happen throughout the Bible. We see it happen throughout the Old Testament. We see that most of the things, even the very name of Babel later gave rise to what would eventually come after that, Babylon.
There you go. Very good. Very good. All right. Here's the second question I have from this text. Look at Genesis 9, and we'll start in verse 20. And Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. Then he drank of the wine and was drunk and became uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him. Then he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brethren." And he said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth. May he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." Well, number one, what happened? I don't know. Don't have a clue. There may be an intent to speak about a homosexual act. It may simply be seeing his father naked. There is a particular religious group that from this passage, this is terrible even to think that someone would believe this, but from this passage, this is the curse that produced the black-skinned people. That's what they say, this particular religious group. It's ridiculous. And the whole thing about that, I don't know what it's about. I don't know everything about it. But I think I pretty well know what it's not. But the question I have is, why did Ham do something and Noah cursed his son? All right, let's look at that. Ham was blessed by God.
Yeah. And I think it says later on, I can't remember where, but it was Balaam, or I can't remember who it was that said that you can't curse who God has blessed.
Okay, I got to look that up. I cannot. What he's saying is there's a place in which God blessed Ham, and therefore you cannot curse what God has blessed. Maybe that's true. I'm not aware of that, but I will try to look that up. What I think helps to understand the passage is knowing the name of the son. Now, we think of Canaan. What do you think about? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Yeah, on my way. Why? Because it's a positive word most of the time. It's the promised land. But the problem is, Canaan was the land of all of the wicked peoples. In fact, the people who dwelt in that land that God was finally going to give to his people, I was reading one guy who said, one commentator said, it was the worst of humanity that lived there. They practiced every kind of awful abomination that you can think of. All of those Hittites and Perizzites and Girgashites and Amorites. I mean, the Canaanites. So he's not in this text he is not cursing Canaan, the person. He is saying that because of Ham's activity, there is a curse on his descendants. Now, eventually, that's eradicated when the people of God go in. Now, they didn't do what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to eradicate everybody, but they didn't. Now, how is it fair for one person to do something and God curse all the descendants after? Anybody want to think about that? Because it's a hard thing to think about.
Is it a fact that God caused that to happen?
There you go.
Or is it that God knew that would happen because of who was going to follow after Ham? And I think there are many cases in the Old Testament that's true. And that's the only way that I can justify God saying, kill all of them, man, woman, and child. Well, how do you justify killing a child? Well, is a child safe? Absolutely. So then if God takes that child's life before he grows to be an adult, that will be a sinful adult that God knows he's going to be, then is that fair for God to do that? So I think that's the way I look at all of it. God knows what they're going to be. And I was going to ask the question, did Noah put a curse on Ham, or is that maybe prophecy?
Well, weave together what you said. I think what's going on, best I can do with this passage is to say that the sin of Ham, whatever it was, all sin has repercussions. And the curse, it seems to me, was a curse that said, you're going to be a servant of servants to your brethren. The curse was one day, and it was fulfilled when the children of Israel came out of Egypt and took the land. That's the fulfillment of this curse. So the curse was not assigning them to be bad people. It was saying, you're going to serve, and why would they serve? Why would they have to be in service? Because they're going to be evil. And it seems to me that all he's saying is, Ham began the process of influencing his descendants to be evil. That's where it comes from. And we can use that lesson for us because we all know the influence that people can have and families can have. And we can disrupt people for generations by some decisions that we make. And I think that's the lesson that comes from this text, because I don't understand how all of that fits together, but that's the lesson that I think comes from the text. Okay? Two people, Nisha and then Ronisa, and then either one. Do Aiden first, that's fine.
I just had like a small comment. I just thought it was weird, it's given the idea that it's supposed to be a negative thing, what they're saying, but really from the New Testament perspective, aren't we all supposed to be servants?
Well, that's true. And I think that there is nothing inherently wrong with being in servitude because we choose to serve God. So that's not inherently wrong. But at the same time, it is a fact that because of the evilness in that country, God destroyed them. Others were put in servitude to the Israelites when they came in. There was a particular group that tried to fool them, the Gibeonites. And they tried to fool them to think they had come from a great distance away, and they had heard about the great things they were doing, and they took old clothes and they got spoiled bread and did all this stuff to say, we've heard about you from way over there. Can we get in league with each other? And they said, well, sure. And then God said, you should have asked me. They live next door. They're one of the people you're supposed to eradicate. And so since they fooled them, they became servants, literal servants. They tilled the land, carried the water, the text says. So you're right. Servitude by definition is not negative. However, in this case, there is servitude that seems to have been because you are evil, this is what's going to happen. So that's good.
I, for one, do not want to know my future.
Good point.
And I go back to what Mark was saying. That was the direction I was going about. Was this a curse or was this prophecy? I think it was a prophecy,
I think it
and
was.
the curse was that they found out what their future was going to be.
Oh, and I hadn't thought about that. That could very well be the case. I hadn't thought about it. So it was a prophecy that this is going to happen, which of course it is. But the curse part might be that now you know what's coming. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. That makes pretty good sense. Right?
Well, just within the context of this passage and the comments that you made earlier, you told us that the area of Canaan was especially wicked. I maybe have a very low estimation of mankind. And
Okay.
that can only be because of my own personal demons.
I get you. I get you.
But I would challenge you to identify a region that was ever described
Right.
as being particularly godly.
Yeah.
There isn't any.
No.
Humankind has always been wicked. And so I look at this passage just within the context of this passage, and what I see is Noah lifting up Shem and Japheth because they did something that was good,
That's right.
in contrast to what Ham did, or of course we don't know exactly what he did, but clearly in contrast to Ham, in my opinion,
Yeah.
maybe in contrast to mankind in general.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. I think you're 100% right. It is interesting, though, that there are places where the fear of God existed and the people of God didn't know it. When Abram and Isaac both went down to Egypt, they thought for sure that was a heathen group and they would take their wives. And they didn't know God was there, and yet God was. So you're right. There is no nation said to be, because a nation is people and people are evil. But it is also interesting that God is often in places that we don't even know he is. That's fascinating. Go ahead.
In understanding in the reality of Canaan and being a servant of both Shem and Japheth, the idea is that all the peoples, even later the Amalekites, it operate. I'd like to believe that in the context of the whole thing, it is more or less the idea that God knows, he gives them chances.
Sure.
He gives them chances over and over again. And when they choose to defy God for the last time, it's like, okay, I tried to give you so many chances, and yet you're choosing to do, you're continually choosing the opposite.
That is
so
true.
I'm going to end you before anybody else. Literally, he follows in your practices.
I think God does that for sure. God absolutely gives people chances. And so even this curse, this prophecy, this idea, they still had a chance to change. That's exactly right. Mm-hmm.
To add to that, actually, I think this kind of remember when Abraham kept asking, if there were only 50 in Sodom who were righteous, would you spare it? If there were only 10, I think God kept that same standard. If you could not find 10 people that are righteous in the entire city of Sodom, then He would destroy it. And that's why he commanded the Israelites to completely get rid of the Canaanites. Also, I found scriptural reference to what I said before.
Oh, okay.
So in Genesis 9:1, it says, "So God blessed Noah and his sons," and then in Numbers 23:8, it is Balaam. It says, "How shall I curse whom God has not cursed, and how shall I?" Well, it was something similar to that. Yeah.
Yeah, verse 8. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to think about that.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it. I tell you what, until you said what you said, I'd never connected. He never found 10 people faithful in Sodom, so he destroyed the city. How many people got on the ark? 8. Isn't that interesting? What if there were 10 people faithful? Would the flood have happened? I don't know. That's interesting. Okay, let's finish it out. How does this folder unfold itself? How do the things that are happening here, what do they do? Well, I think two things. One, the story of Cain shows the chaos that begins with a failure to honor God properly. When Cain and Abel offered their sacrifices, God accepted Abel's but not Cain's. I am convinced that Cain knew it because God rained down fire from heaven and consumed Abel's offering but left his on the altar. That being true, immediately Cain would know he was not accepted. Now, what was his problem? How did he fail? Did he fail because he offered fruit from the ground versus a bloody sacrifice that Abel offered? Or did he fail because Abel offered the best that he had and Cain did not bring the best that he had? I don't know. All I know is this: the principle that I'm sure is true throughout all of Scripture is found in Romans 10:17. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. All I know for sure is Cain did not do what God told him to do. That's all I know. Whatever it was, I don't know specifically. But when we decide, and that's what this whole section does, from creation to confusion, chaos, you see it unfolding through the whole text, and you can see it illustrated in the life of Cain. And then look what happens to him after it. Look what happens to him, the mark. Look, being afraid that he's going to be killed, and he has to leave where he was. I mean, chaos resulted because he didn't start out with God in the proper way. And the second thing illustrates this folder idea is Genesis 9, 1 to 7. The world after the flood was quite different than before the flood. After the flood, look at verse 6. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man. And as for you, be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply in it. Go back to chapter 8 in verse 22. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night shall not cease. I think the world was radically different. So, what does that mean? God created it, and it was perfect. And because of what we learn about humanity, represented right there at the Tower of Babel, confusion and chaos ensued. And things have not been right ever since. And that's what this first folder, I think, represents for all of us. Close us out. Murray? Well, you are, because when you finish, we're finished.
Okay, well, I wanted to make one observation about Cain, which is striking when I think about it. Cain's sacrifice was not accepted by God. So Cain presumably was angry with God. And so what does he do? He slays his brother.
There you go.
How misguided can you be? That's humanity, man.
Yeah, that's very good, and that's very true. That's what happens. We jump at the wrong place, head in the wrong direction. All right, good stuff.